Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second meeting of the Scanning the Horizon community of this year. We're already starting. A few people still might join us a bit later, but we also want to use the 90 minutes we have together the best that we can. You might have already noticed the pop-up on your Zoom that we are recording this session. So this is for the people that unfortunately are not able to join us live today. So we'll share the recording with them afterwards. And we're also using the AI note taker to also help us document the event. I think I know most, or I would say half of you. So for those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Eva Gondor. I'm Senior Program Manager at International Civil Society Center, and I have the pleasure of hosting today's session. At the center, I focus on our civic space work, including the Anticipating Futures for Civil Society Operating Space Initiative, which aims to strengthen anticipatory capacities and future readiness of civil society professionals who work to defend and expand civic space. And you might know from communication via email that we're currently developing a guide for stress testing organizational strategies using Foresight. And we will share more about this guide and have a in detail and in-depth discussion about it at the Scanning Lab meeting at the end of June. So one of the questions that actually have been raised quite a lot when we're developing this guide is how to bring participants into the right mindset to immerse into possible futures rather than view future only as a continuation of present. Scenario simulation is one of the ways to do this, as it encourages us to pre-live a possible future and react or actually act as if this future was happening now. In this way, we can experience what it takes to deal with conditions we haven't encountered yet. So if future conditions arrive, we can build on this experience. And this is exactly what we want to do today. So experiencing a possible future, rehearsing future is the title of today's session. And we are really happy that we have Krishna Gomez from the RUC Union, whose work has actually been a great source of inspiration for also the center's approach to futures thinking and our own foresight experimentation. Prisna is a human rights lawyer and community organizer from the Philippines who turned into a strategist and foresight practitioner. She's currently working with NGOs and funders around the world to help them build futures muscles. Chris is, as I already mentioned, a co-founder of the RUC Union and also previously worked with Just Labs and the Center for Law, Justice, and Society in Colombia, among a lot of other roles that she also held. So when it comes to today, Chris will share with us her experience with foresight and building futures muscles and take us on a journey into the year 2036 to pre-live and navigate a possible future for organizations in 10 years' time, in which we will jointly face dilemmas, make decisions, and respond to the world as it is in that future. So through this taster session, we really want to start building a sense of agency and leadership under unfamiliar conditions and train our futures muscles. So we're going to start with Chris' presentation, followed by an individual reflection, then a quick breakout group exercise, and we'll close with a final plenary discussion, jointly reflecting on the simulation experience and how we can further continue strengthening and applying our futures muscles. So I'm going to stop at this point. Chris, it's great to have you with us today. Thanks a lot for accepting the invitation, and over to you to guide us through the presentation and simulation.
Thanks, Eva. Hi, everyone. It's evening time here in the Philippines. I know Sheila is in the Philippines, or are you in the Philippines as well now? So, if I can make a special request, it will help me in my energy level if you can turn on your video if you're able to. If you're doing your laundry, eating a hard boiled egg, that's all good to me. It just helps me to see how it's resonating or not. If you're falling asleep, then I know to start eating fire or something. So I'm going to walk you through my journey of how I gained futures muscles. I started a traditional way, then I went rogue. And so what I'm going to share with you isn't really like this is the way to do it. It's my own journey of finding out what worked, what didn't work with what I tried, and I tried a lot of things, and what excites me now. And one of those things is scenario simulation. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to go through a whole presentation that hopefully won't be boring. And there will be points when I would ask you to turn to yourself. Because building muscles is really being aware of where am I, and then we'll see. Hopefully, it's fun. Okay, I'm gonna start, and if I can find my screen, there it is. So you can see my screen. Yeah. I actually don't look at my presentation when I make presentations. I look at you. I'm scrolling through your faces. Great. So, social simulations. And I know for most of you, this is super basic because, well, this is the scanning community, but for some, it might be new. So, I'm just going to go through very quick with some ideas that hopefully will help us be on the same page. And the first one is futures thinking. And as we know, futures thinking is not about having that crystal ball to predict the future. It's about thinking about multiple futures through a sort of an art and a science, and then working backwards from those multiple futures to then ask, what are some common strategic insights across these very different futures? And then, based on that, making decisions today so you can be prepared, you can have a sense of agency, regardless of what future comes to pass. So, it isn't about prediction. And that's what excites me the most about futures thinking. It's that feeling of power and calm confidence that otherwise is hard to have because you've gained multiple futures. So it's futures plural and not one future. And to me, they're like two ends of the bridge in futures thinking. I'm going to tackle the first one. And the first one is you start with imagination. And I'm going to start with a basic fact about us human beings, which is it turns out that thinking about the future is hard. It's not our fault. We are just wired that way. It's our neurobiological wiring. We have many cognitive biases and the way we're wired. Some of them help us in coping, but some of those make it hard for us to think about the future. I'm going to share with you two of the many reasons that make futures thinking hard. If you recognize some of them in yourself, then you know it's very human. The first one is it turns out that we treat our future selves like strangers. What do I mean by that? So, there have been hundreds of fMRI scans done of the human brain that focus on this green region of the brain. That green part is the medial prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain has something to do with our sense of self awareness and also empathy. So, they asked people to think about their current self. When they did, that part of the brain lit up because, well, you're recognizing yourself and you have empathy for that self. But when they asked the same people to think about their future selves, that part of the brain started powering down. And the farther into the future they were asked to imagine themselves, it powered down even more. The correlation that they drew from that is we don't actually necessarily recognize our 10-year from now self as if it's our own self. What does that mean for the decisions that we make that benefit that future self versus the decisions we have to make that might benefit our current self? Do I save for retirement or spend a lot of my money now? Do I eat that extra bar of chocolate or do I refrain to stay? Those kinds of questions we think we act rationally on them, but apparently there are certain ways that we're wired that makes us decide certain ways when it comes to our future selves. The second reason that makes futures thinking hard is that there's this cognitive bias that make us tend to underestimate threats, and we believe that life will continue as normal, keep calm and carry on. It's great for coping because if we if we just, if we just panicked every time we meet an adversity, small or big in life, that'll be very difficult to exist in the world. And this cognitive bias is called the normalcy bias. And it helps us to cope, but when we're faced with a big disruption, we can tend to underestimate its consequences. As you know, we've been talking about the impending decline, if not collapse, of the aid system for, I don't know, since I started doing this work 2 decades ago. And yet, somehow, when things happened in the last couple of years or last year, we were still very much surprised. And even when things were burning in front of us, people tended to think, yeah, it's happening, but maybe it won't get that bad. Or even if it gets bad, maybe it won't happen to me. That is one cognitive bias that we have. So if you have at least these two cognitive biases, the question that we ask ourselves is, how do we cope with this thing called a polycrisis, where you don't have one crisis, but you have multiple crises that are interacting with each other to make for a messier whole? Well, it's not hopeless. There's an antidote, and that antidote is cultivating a strong futures imagination of a particular kind. And not only is that an antidote to all of this, I believe that as change makers, we are only capable of bringing about things that we are capable of imagining. So imagination is so important. And even then, that's just the one side of the bridge. In my experience doing features work, and I've been doing it for a good part of almost a decade, is some of the best organizations can get to the imagination part. I've done so many scenario planning exercises, especially before. Uh, but then I would always look back at these organizations, and I'm talking about some of the biggest global organizations, well funded, very well established, and some small ones, including community groups. And when I took a step back after a couple of years of doing it, I started being frustrated with my own work and with myself. Because when I look back at those organizations and I ask myself, did those scenarios actually produce a change in the way that they made decisions on strategy, on programming, their behavior, their culture? My answer was a very unsatisfactory no. And so they would create these scenarios, write them in very good reports, and as with the case in most reports in our sector, they gather dust and they never revisit them. Or even if they do, it's very surface level. And so I started being obsessed about what is going on. Why does that woman never get to cross the other side of the bridge that has to do with action? Really acting on what your imagination brings you to see. And so I started really puzzling over this. And that's when I started focusing on the whole neuroscience of futures thinking. And so I've made a lot of realizations. I continue to do so. My husband says I have like a major crisis every couple of months, maybe every couple of weeks, thinking, oh, I'm not making an impact. This isn't working. And so with all the realizations I've had, uh, some of them were fundamental, I realized. And it's a critique on how I used to do features thinking. Number one, when I got trained in features thinking, it was a great training. I got trained at the Institute for the Future, and I went with it. I took the toolkit, and I just went out with it. But I realized that when you look at the foresight um, field, a lot of those approaches do not engage emotions. And I will talk a bit about this and how it connects to the basic neuroscience insights that I shared with you at the beginning. The second one is most foresight approaches or futures thinking approaches are focused on tools and not so much on building real muscles. I liken it to, when you want to learn how to play the guitar, you don't pick up a giant book or a journal article to understand the analysis of the history of the guitar or the wood that's used in a guitar. You go on YouTube, you watch a video, and the first few minutes you're strumming, and you kept doing that. How do we learn futures muscles in such a habit forming or muscle strengthening way? And instead of overwhelming people thinking they have to learn this whole new toolkit or course, what are the essentials? And so I whittled it down to the essentials. And I came up with this thing called road futurism because it sounds nice. but also because my work wife Ishtar and I came up with this name Rogue Union, which is a way of doing things on skills we need as a sector, but in a rogue way, meaning a way that is not the usual way of learning things. And so in Rogue Futures, I might ask myself, if I were to whittle it down to the essentials, because when you're learning new muscles, you don't want to overwhelm yourself and start doing pull-ups when you should just pick up a 1 kilo dumbbell. What are those components of the 1 kilo dumbbell? So I came up with 6 steps to Rogue Futurism. Everyone loves their steps. I came up with 6. So I'm going to walk you through 4 of the 6 today, and we're going to do it super quickly. Are you ready? Yeah, okay. You have no choice. Let's do it. So, step 1. Step 1 is about being able to look wide. What do I mean by that? So, you know how we, including myself, are trained to have specialization. That's how our schools, our universities, and our jobs are cut out to be, right? And specialization is really good in being able to go deep into an area of expertise. But I realized that in foresight, it can act almost as blinders. It allows you to focus, but then it blinds you from everything else around you. So it's like a horse with blinders or blinkers, or maybe a human being walking around with blinders. And I realized, how about we replace the blinders with, say, multicolored blinking sunglasses. All of us walk this earth with our own pair of colored glasses. That color is born out of our background, our how we were raised, our culture, and that's important. That's what makes us have our identity. But in foresight, it's critical to actually have different colors and areas of discipline to see different things in you, but also to work with people who are very different from you. So let's see how that sunglasses work out in 2 senses. The first one, in terms of breadth of area of discipline. There's this thing in foresight called steep, and I know Sheila's very familiar with this. Some call it pestle or peste. I use steep because it sounds nice. What does steep stand for? STEEP stands for social, technological, economic, environmental, and political. In essence, these are the different areas of reality. You know how you can be a political expert, economic expert. When I was still in law school, I focused on political. Barely. I just focused on memorizing my law provisions. But the argument is we all tend to gravitate towards one or a couple of areas of expertise. But in foresight, it's really, really useful to be able to do a spread. And so um, I realized when I did my training at the Institute for the Future, this is in Silicon Valley. This was 8 years ago now. I was there, and it's Silicon Valley, and I was one in a room of 35 people. I was the only one from the social impact sector, and people were talking, especially during the coffee break, about, things that seemed so basic to them, haptic clothing, and all these sorts of stuff. And they were talking about it as if they were talking about, I don't know, eggs and for breakfast. And I realized that I was so way out of depth there. I had no clue what people were talking about. I would Google things under the table with my phone just to be able to catch up. And I realized at that moment that my blind spot was the T. It was tech. And so what I did right after that, I started basically working on my blind spot. And I didn't go take a course on technology, if there's such a thing. I asked myself, what do I like doing? I like reading magazines, so I subscribed to a magazine. It's called Wired Magazine, and I still read it. It's enjoyable, it's good stuff, it's tech and culture. And so, what is your blind spot? We're gonna do a super simple diagnostic exam of you. And for this, we would generally need you to turn on your video because you will need to see each other. Here again are the different areas. Steep. And also, Alex is typing in the chat what STEEP stands for. I'm going to stop sharing for a bit. And I would love for you to score yourself 1 to 5. 5 being the highest, meaning I'm very strong in this area, and 1 being the lowest, I barely pay attention to this. If you can score yourself with every letter of steep on how good you pay attention to it, and then we'll see how everyone else has fared. 2 minutes. 5 the highest, 1 the lowest. Ready? Okay. So I'm going to call on each area. And if that area is one of your 2 lowest scores, then please do raise your hand. You can raise it physically or use the button here. Yeah? And please look around the virtual room to also see our collective, if we do have a collective blind spot. Yeah, ready? Okay. So, who among you scored had S or social as one of your 2 lowest scores? No one. Interesting. How about T, technology? Okay, Fred, Doris, Tala, Miriam, Alex, Eva. Okay. And how about economic? Okay. 4, 5, 6 again. Okay. Fred hasn't lowered his hand. Okay. Environmental. Okay. Miriam. And P, political. Tala. Okay. I would love for you to take note of these 2 things. And it's not about judgment. This is not about shaming people. It starts with awareness. I became aware of my own blind spot, but also I do this very scientific, unscientific diagnostic. And in our sector, I found that across the board, technology is one of the biggest collective blind spots that we have. And yet we keep complaining that the tech bros are taking over our lives, right? How do we even opine and have a sense of agency if we don't, including myself many years ago, really make the effort? So, what is that first small habit that you think you can do out of genuine excitement or curiosity because you know this is a blind spot and I would like to do something about it? That's my challenge with you. And an offer. I have this favorite reading list and watch list of really cool podcasts, 10-minute documentary, really cool articles per area of STEEP. If you want that, I'm going to share that Google Doc with Alex and Ava, and they can share it with you. Maybe during, on a Sunday, you want to engage with something interesting, you can take a look at it. Yep. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So, moving on. The first sense of using the multicolored blinking sunglasses is looking at the different areas of steep. The other way is this woman goes out in nature and uses her sunglasses. The first thing she sees is an individual tree, an event. And since I'm Filipina, I'm going to use a coconut tree. And that event, as an example, would be say in 2018, Bolsonaro got elected to power in Brazil. Now, if you're really using those sunglasses, it enables you to see that it wasn't just Bolsonaro in Brazil. There was or is Modi in India, Johnson in the UK, you have Duterte in the Philippines, you had Duterte in the Philippines, Orban no longer in Hungary, but for a long time, and Trump in the US times 2, and many others. And so if you're using those glasses, you realize that the individual coconut trees actually form a forest of similar trees, and that forest is what you call in futures thinking as a trend. And that trend is the rise of authoritarian populists in mainstream politics. It's important to see that. But I always say that most civil society organizations, they base their strategies on trends and often trends alone. And I always say that's like cooking curry with one ingredient. this is going to bring me to step 2 of rogue futurism, which is after seeing the forest for the trees, you actually go and dig deep beneath the surface of the forest. And you get curious. This woman goes down to the forest floor and says, okay, I see the forest, but what is underneath the forest? What is moving the forest or enabling this forest to grow? And so she takes out her spanking, very fancy ground penetrating radar to be able to see almost like to the tectonic plates that move the forest, and say what trees can even grow. And those are the giant forces, giant historical forces under the surface that move the trees. In futures thinking, that's what you call deep drivers of change. And if we're going to go to the example of the rise of authoritarian populists, a deep driver of change, I would say, would be the decline of public trust in institutions. And deep drivers have existed long before trends, and they're expected to survive trends, and they're expected to exist for a couple more decades to come at least. And we know that this trust in public or even private institutions has been on the decline for decades. And so if we're going to look at steep again, here are some of the examples. I won't go through them one by one, and you see them. And these are big historical forces that have been there. So if you're coming up with your strategy, it's important to not just look at trends. See what are the bigger driving forces that if combined with trends, help you to really have a fuller, not yet complete, but fuller picture of of what you should be thinking about futures. Now, step 3, we're going fast. You're still good? Okay, so step 1 is looking wide, being able to see the forest for the trees. Step 2 is being able to go and dig deep to see what's beneath the surface. Now, step 3 is about you're walking around the forest, you've seen the beneath the surface as well, and then one day you stumble upon this seedling of a different species you hadn't seen before. It's not a coconut, and it makes you wonder, why is this seedling growing in here? It's in the fringes. It's not yet mainstream. In futures thinking, this is what we call signals of change. These are things that are happening in the fringes. They're still small or localized, but they point to compelling new ways that the future can evolve into. They might never become mainstream, but they help you ask really important, provocative questions. And so it's like that article in the bottom right corner of your newspaper or your news app that most people even gloss over and don't see. And it's a skill to be able to spot those things. So I'm going to give you a few examples of signals of change so you see what I mean by signals of change. So maybe some of you have heard of DAOs. How many of you have heard of DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations? Okay, great. Okay, DAOs. So I'm in this WhatsApp group of foresight practitioners around the global south. And a couple of years ago, this was a thing in our WhatsApp group. And DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. I'll explain them by juxtaposing them with a traditional organization. This is familiar, right? Many organizations still today, they're hierarchical, they're clear lines of reporting, control, there are clear mandates and functions, and you have a back office like finance, ops that enable things to work. A DAO happens on the blockchain. So when things happen on the blockchain, we know some of the fundamentals of things happening on the blockchain. There's an online ledger where you see how decisions are made. And supposedly there's radical transparency. I am, by the way, not endorsing this, but we're going into the basics of it, right? A DAO is powered by the blockchain where, say, we all have a common resource. Say, Tala and Doris and I all together own 10 pesos. And we agree that we're going to give that 10 pesos to a grantee if at least 2 of the 3 of us decide for that grantee. And in the blockchain, there's a smart contract that lays out the rules. When 2 of the 3 token holders vote for this grantee, that money is disbursed automatically to that person. That's essentially how a DAO operates. There is no hierarchy. Supposedly, people who co-own a certain resource decide together through the blockchain, and there's a radical transparency you can see. And it supposedly cuts back on the back office because things can just be, say, dispersed automatically. It has its imperfections, but that's the spirit of a DAO. You even have these types of services now. It's called, if you look at the top center, it calls itself the endowment. It's a new mechanism for people with wealth or money to be able to use this instead of traditional intermediaries to spend their money. There I was in that WhatsApp group of mine. Someone in our group actually experimented on the first philanthropic DAO in the world. And the idea is that members of the community, including past grantees, each get a token and they all get to vote where the money goes. And it made me wonder, why are people experimenting on these different ways of grant making? Are people looking for radical transparency? Are people looking for not one program officer deciding on who gets that grant? What are people craving for? That's why the signal was so intriguing to me. The other thing, I'm going to skip this, is it was from last year. So Microsoft released this report called 2025, the year the frontier firm is born. And it talked about AI agents. You know, you see phase one, we're currently there. You're a person, a human being, and you have an assistant. Let's say if you use ChatGPT or Claude or some other large language model that does certain tasks for you, you direct it. They're saying that phase two will be a human working alongside digital colleagues. And a frontier firm will actually evolve into phase three, where you have a human boss managing and coordinating a team of AI agents. These are not like your usual chat GPT. AI agents are actually able to make decisions on their own when they have access to all sorts of information. And so what they're saying is that it will go from an organizational chart where someone is finance and does finance, period, to there's a mission and people change roles depending on the work or the outcome that needs to be achieved. And so they're saying that perhaps in the future, we will go from specialized jobs or hyper specialization to augmented generalists. This article in the New York Times, and I think Alex is sharing the link in the chat. I highly recommend that you read it. It's like a 5-minute read. It's interesting to me because it places AI agents not in organizations, but in the day-to-day life of young people. Where AI agents are not some add-on, they run their whole lives, including talking to their mother on WhatsApp using an AI agent. How will we imagine a world where our entire lives are run by AI agents? And this is a signal, a sneak peek of that. The final signal I'm going to share. So I was at the Dubai Future Forum a few months ago. It's the largest gathering of futurists in the world. And the keynote speaker asked a question that really stayed with me. We know how we're all talking about how we are saturated by too much information. It's hard to focus. Many things are calling for our attention all the time. And he said, what if in the future a nation's most valuable asset is its people's focused attention? It's not GDP, but our ability to focus. Because how do we solve the biggest problems of the world? How do you cure cancer when you cannot have the attention span of more than 30 seconds? How do we do that? It becomes such a scarce resource. So to me, signals of change are critical not because of this type of tech gadget or this innovation. I don't really focus on whether it's DAO or not. I focus on the higher level questions that they point to or they ask about what are people craving for? Why are these things even happening? It's about finding patterns than the actual signals themselves. Now, before we go into the simulation, I'm going to bring us to step 4. The first 3 steps, trends, deep drivers, and signals to me are like the different cards that you put together to come up with future worlds. I call them worlds instead of scenarios because to me, scenarios are most effective when they're 3 or 4 dimensional, like a world you step into. So step 4 is about you. It's like you put together the different ingredients of the curry and you put them in my very fancy machine called the future simulator. So let's say you mix a trend, a deep driver, a signal, and what you get is a new future possibility that really makes you ask hard questions. So, uh, before I go and give you the experience of a world, I want to focus on go back to the whole neuroscience of why I do simulations and why the worlds or scenarios I use are the way they are. How many of you have read future scenarios or at least scenario reports? We see them all the time. Future of 8 2040, future of this 2050, right? And normally they're written in a third person um, abstract facts way. What do I mean by that? Here's a typical story or way it's written. It's the year 2036. This is an example. It is now required by law to take one migrant into your home at any given time. In a normal way of writing the scenario will be written as a story that answers the following questions. Why does this law exist? This government passed it, resident citizens reacted this way, and these are the biggest changes in society as a result. It's helpful, but if we're going to go back to the whole neuroscience of why futures thinking is so hard, remember, we tend to treat our future selves as if they're strangers. It doesn't help us in hacking that neurobiological barrier if we see a story where we cannot see ourselves in it. It's third person. So I stumbled upon the work of this futurist, Jane McGonigal, and I realized there's a whole neuroscience of how scenarios should be. And they should be written in a first person lived experience. You're not hovering from above looking at the world, but you're standing in that street corner where you experience it and sense it and smell it, and you are part of it and you have agency. That's how that future self becomes immediate and real, and that's how you have empathy for that person. So imagine the same future world, right? Taking one migrant into your home. In a first person world or scenario, these are the questions you would answer in the story. How does that look like in your daily life? Do you comply, Miriam? Do you resist, Farouk? How does it change your habits, Anne? And do you still walk around in your underwear in the morning knowing there's someone sleeping on your couch, Alex? When you frame it that way, you get invested in that future. And so they actually ran a scenario simulation with 20,000 people of a global respiratory pandemic originating from China 10 years before COVID. In that simulation, over several days, they asked people to go out in public wearing masks. Day 2, work from home. Day 3, refrain from social events, the very kinds of things that we ended up doing and having to do during COVID. Can you imagine how those people behaved when COVID actually happened 10 years later? While most of us were paralyzed by fear and shock, these 20,000 people, they were like, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do. I've pre lived through this reality. Instead of fear and despair, they had calm confidence. And that really changed everything for me. I realized if our sector kept doing simulations of unimaginable futures, then nothing becomes unimaginable. Everything becomes imaginable, and maybe we can find some agency in it. I highly recommend this book if you want to learn more about it, Imaginable by Jane McGonigal. Okay, I've talked too much. Now it's time to experience a simulation. We're going to simulate. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you the one rule for simulating. The rule is you have to suspend your disbelief. I'm going to show the scenario in a video. I need you to spend 0 minutes arguing with the scenario and saying, oh, this is not going to happen. Oh, I don't like this scenario. It's not about whether it's feasible, whether we like it. I don't necessarily like it myself, but this is about doing that mental stretch and knowing that a good future world or scenario has to sound ridiculous at first. At first, because if you look closely, it has basis in a lot of signals and drivers and trends. And so this is about practicing that mental stretch. And I would keep going to what Jane McGonigal said, just because you don't like something doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it. So we're going to do this. And as we do this, please take what you need. If the scenario is too much for you, you want to go continue your laundry for the next 10 minutes, have a cup of coffee or tea, that's also fine. But please take what you need. I'm gonna now, okay, I'm gonna share a different part of my screen. There it is, share sound, okay. Okay, kindly do this if you see my video once I start playing it, and if you hear it, fine.
Monday, April 13th, 2036. You arrive at the hub. It used to be called an office. Your core team is 3 people. 3 humans, each managing 5 AI agents running continuously in the background, executing, monitoring, drafting, analyzing, reporting. You spend the first 15 minutes reviewing what the agents did while you slept. Field data synthesis across 6 countries, compliance summaries, fund disbursements to field workers, tasks that once consumed entire departments delivered before your coffee gets cold. The work that flows to you is the hardest work there is. You sit with a community leader in a room where there is no trust yet, and stay until there is. You hold the tension when 2 partners with conflicting values must share the same space. You pause a program the data says is working, because 15 years of experience tells you the data is missing something. You are largely freed from the mechanical and repetitive tasks, more present for the nuanced, emotionally intelligent work this sector rarely had the space to do. For years, civil society resisted AI agents taking over so many of the jobs, but the cascading crises of the late 2020s, floods, displacement, disease, political fracture compounding each other relentlessly, made the old way of operating untenable. Efficiency became a condition of survival. When emergency became the permanent condition, the traditional grant cycle, multi-year planning horizons, 9-month reporting delays, became impossible to defend. Large foundations, multilateral bodies, government development agencies, and millions of individual donors pulled together. What emerged was the Mission Commons, a pooled resource fund, governed collectively, with a registry of credentialed specialists across every relevant domain. And powering it all was the Mycelium, an AI sensing network that aggregates crisis signals across thousands of data streams and identifies emerging problems before they peak. When the Mycelium flags a problem, the Commons doesn't issue a grant. It assembles a pod, a task force that forms within days. The system identifies the skills a mission requires, cross-references the registry, and sends assembly calls to the individuals. The pod draws its budget from the Commons Fund, operates under a clear mandate and timeline, and dissolves when the work is done. Everything, the learnings, the metrics, the slip-ups, is uploaded. The system gets sharper with every completed mission. Early pods delivered results at a speed and cost the traditional model could not match. More funders joined. Within a few years, the Commons had become the dominant infrastructure for social impact funding. On paper, it covers the full spectrum. Nothing excludes the slow, deep work of changing systems. But in practice, the pooled fund flows almost entirely toward missions that are acute, visible, and measurable. Work where progress can be photographed and a milestone declared. These are the missions the Mycelium flags. The other kind, building the trust that makes a government program actually reach the people it's meant to serve, sustaining a movement through years when nothing visible is happening, grinding through bureaucracies and shifting political regimes, none of this fits into a mandate or a dissolution date. The Mycelium doesn't flag it. The assembly calls rarely come. Inside this system, something else has quietly broken open. This shape-shifting organization has done what the sector struggled to do for generations. It made it structurally impossible to cling to power. Executive directors no longer stay for 2 decades. Founders no longer outlast their usefulness. Leadership is a function of the mission, not a title held indefinitely. When the mandate ends, so does the role. What you carry forward is not authority, it is reputation, judgment, and the wisdom of missions completed. Leadership becomes stewardship. Everyone in the pod is there because they are genuinely needed. At the same time, a generation quietly took over. Gen Z had always understood something their predecessors did not, that work is one part of a life, not a substitute for one. They had watched burnout hollow out the most dedicated people in civil society, and they refused to repeat it. When their time came to lead, they changed not just the culture, but the architecture. 4-day weeks. Sabbatical is standard. The right to disconnect in every contract. The old model of the exhausted, overextended humanitarian finally lost its heroic shine. The Commons doesn't employ you, it credentials you. You become an independent node in the registry, assembled into pods when your profile matches a mission, and then you're idle between them. You move between issue areas and team configurations, building a reputation score that determines whether the next assembly call comes to you or to someone else. To ensure financial security for everyone in the registry, the Commons provides a decent basic income for people who are currently not on active pod mission for a maximum of 18 months. You've freelanced before. This is freelancing at a different order of magnitude, more resources, with a safety net, but also a system that never stops watching how you perform. Not everyone has made peace with the rhythm. For some, the gaps feel daunting. But for a generation that came up watching their parents disappear into offices for decades, the new model feels like a kind of balance. You sprint during a project, then you rest. You take up that hobby you never had time for. You care for a loved one. And the gates have opened. A decade ago, a junior role at an international NGO required a master's degree, 2 internships, and a network from the right institutions. Today, the augmented generalist thrives. Agents handle the depth. You bring breadth, instinct, and story. The people doing this work now come from the communities most affected by the problems being solved. Diversity is no longer a strategic aspiration. It is the operating reality. A notification arrived this morning. A pod is assembling around a humanitarian crisis about to erupt in a region you know well. Well-resourced. 4 humans, 18 agents. The dissolution conditions are already written in. You've also been asked to anchor a long-term community trust initiative outside of the Commons. 2 years. Slow. Nearly unmeasurable. The kind of work the Commons doesn't fund and agents can't do. What do you do?
What do you do? So, Anne said, incredible, sign me up. Well, that is a decision you have to make now. You are no longer here May 7th, 2026. You're May 7th, 2036, and you have to make the decision. Do you accept that assembly call from the Mission Commons or not? Or do you go with the other option? Outside of the Mission Commons, that 2-year initiative that is not funded by it is slow. It's the messy work of building systems and navigating messy relationships. Or do you do something else? I would love to ask you to journal for the next 5 or so minutes. You don't need, please do not write a masterpiece, just do a free write and describe where you are at this moment 10 years from now. How old are you? Where are you waking up in? Who are you waking up next to? What's your biggest concern in life? Are you still working in this sector? And if you are, how do you respond to that notification in your inbox? 5 minutes, free write, make it vivid, make it real, not just philosophical, but walk through your day and write about it. And then afterwards, that journal, I would invite everyone to type it in the chat because this is a social simulation where we benefit from each other's stories that enable us to see the same future from different angles of other people's lived realities. So maybe you want to type it in Word first or directly in the chat and then paste it in the chat after. Enjoy free writing.
Di ba nga ito ang iyong gusto? O ito'y lilisan na ako? Mga alaala'y ibabaon, kalakipang tamis ng kahapon. Gabing di namamalayang oras ay lumilipad, mga sandaling lumalayag kung saan man tayo mapadpad. Bawat kilig na nagdarama sa tuwing hawak ang iyong kamay, ito'y maling akala, isang malaking sablay. Pasensya ka na sa mga kathang isip kong ito, wari dala lang ng pagmamahal sa'yo. Ako'y gigising na sa panaginip kong ito, at sa wakas ay kusang lalayo sa'yo. Gaano kabilis nagsimula, katong katulin na wala. Maaari ba tayong bumalik sa umpisa upang di na umasa pusong nag-iisa? Pasensya ka na sa mga kathang isip kong ito, wari dala lang ng pagmamahal sa'yo. Ako'y gigising na sa panaginip kong ito, at sa wakas ay kusang lalayo sa'yo. Lalayo sa sumabay sa agos na isinulat ng tadhana, na minsan siya'y para sa iyo, pero minsan siya'y paasa. Tatakbo papalayo, kakalimutan ang lahat. Pero kahit saan man lumingon, nasusulyapan ng kahapon, at sa aking bawat paghinga, ikaw nasa isip ko, sinta. Kaya't pasensya ka na sa mga kathang isip ko ito, wari dala lang ng pagmamahal humaling sa nagniningning mong mga mata. Ika'y isang bituin na nagmula sa langit. Hindi ko mawari ang tagal ay mong tinatangi. Sadya namang nakakapighani. Di may paliwanag ang nararamdaman. Namumukat kadang aking ligaya sa tuwing ika'y papalapit na. Hawakan mo.
If you can kindly, even if it's unfinished, it's meant to be unfinished. I'll be surprised if you wrote a complete journal entry. But whatever you have, if you can share it with colleagues here in the chat. One of perhaps the most powerful thing about social simulations for me is how I'm always surprised by the experiences of others who are very different from me of the same future. I see a future and I'm very sure it will pan out this way given my limited understanding and experience of the world. And then I see another person whose life is very different from me, and it's always such a gift. So I'm requesting us to give that gift to each other. If you can type in your there, okay, there you go, gift to each other. And now Alex is gonna send us in pairs, where for the next 10 minutes or so, you will spend the first 2 minutes or minute and a half reading the journal entry of the person in your pair. And then after that, just have a conversation. Again, you're still in 2036. How are you experiencing this day? What emotions run through you? Walk us through that day that you describe, and what big questions do you have given your experience of this day in 2036? So please type it in the chat, your journal entry, so then your pair, your new BFF, can read it before going into a conversation with each other. So Alex, you're the boss. You're gonna send everyone into pairs. See you back here in 10 minutes. Enjoy your conversation in that day in the future. There, oh, you got your video working, Fred. Oh, so good to see you all. Oh, you're on mute, Fred.
Yes, an AI agent finally woke up and started to do his or her job.
And fixed it. Well, how about we spend the next few minutes just, I consider this like the moment to harvest things in a basket. This is not reporting back, but really, if you were to pull like a surprising insight, an aha moment, or question that's sitting in the pit of your stomach from that experience of living in the future, you're now back to 2026. Would you like to share that with us? We'll spend the next 5 or so minutes just harvesting and having that collective wisdom of time traveling to that future. It could be a sensation, nothing profound. Fernanda?
I can go. I don't think it gave me any discomfort. It was the opposite. It was a sense of joy thinking about this future. To be really honest, I think the only drawback that Eva and we discussed it was like maybe the relationship side of it, that you can miss. But I feel that since COVID, it's not, the workplace is not more the source of creating new social circles or like friendships. It can happen, but I think it's different from the past. Like I kind of got used to it. Yeah, for me, it was a sense of joy. Like I can get a mission, focus, deliver, finish without navigating any politics, policies, these, things that gets lots of our time. It's boring. and it's exhausting. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Fernanda. Sense of joy, which tells me about the things that you are not joyful about. You just enumerated a few of them. Thank you. Somebody else? Fred, you're unmuted. Yes, go ahead, please.
Well, it fits my retirement planning quite well.
Excellent. I thought about you in writing that scenario.
Um, no, actually, the 2-year assignment felt as long as my wife could join me, and I could, go home and see my daughter, visit the grandchildren. The I, we talk about the importance of the older generation letting go. I felt very easy to let this go, saying, I am not going to have to be an expert in managing AI agents. Don't need to, don't really want to. Um, and so, but there's still space for elders. There are a lot of countries in the world where gray hair is an asset. Um, I plan to use it. And it doesn't matter if things don't finish because things usually don't finish in our work in 2 years anyways. So I was quite happy to do that.
Thank you, Fred. Not finishing. And that intergenerational learning, and the gift of experience, and also letting go. Thank you. And I see you're unmuted. I take that as a sign. Or did I misread it?
You misread it. However,
Oh.
I am ready. One ready.
Go ahead, please. You don't
Very
have
much.
to.
No, that's okay. I really struggled with this one because I really see the merits in both, right? I really think that there is a really important space for what the Mission Commons does, especially if it's life saving. So you specifically said it's a humanitarian emergency. I think right now, honestly, you have humanitarian emergencies and they're slow and they're sluggard and they're not as fast as they should be. We get caught in the bureaucracy of it. And I think someone said the politics of it, to the point where I was like, this is not the point of this piece of work. So I can see how if everything's synthesized, everything's ready to go, we deliver. On the other side, sometimes, the absence of communities to be resilient in emergencies is a system problem. And that system problem cannot be changed by AI. It requires the hand holding, the face meeting with decision makers, with communities to change behavior. And that's where AI couldn't quite, do the work. So my question in my thinking was, is a hybrid approach possible? Yeah.
Thank you.
Otherwise I'll be 57, still living in the global south and hoping that I still have something to offer.
Yeah. You know when I was crafting this scenario, I really wanted to put front and center the question of not whether humans will be useful, but what is uniquely human? What is something that is just us? Is it our empathy, our creativity, our ability to navigate messy relationships and tension and make judgment calls? And that gets to the core of it, less about the form or how AI will be and what type of technology, but what makes us uniquely human, and organizing our organizations around that and serving what is uniquely human. um any other thoughts? One more, and then we're gonna go into the closing. Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah, I have three things. First is that I would choose the outside of the mission, the system building, relationship building assignment, mainly because that's my experience. That's how I was trained, and I really don't see myself like managing AI agents. This the old school part of me. And second is, even if I am a foresight practitioner. And I love the idea of the mission commons. I am very uh, I'm afraid that this won't happen in 10 years because of first resistance from INGOs themselves, from governments, for something so huge and so powerful to happen. And the third is, I think there should be a lot of like bridging between these two groups, people who are going to the ground and doing the technical AI supervision work, and what is the connect, to build that community that we now have as a sector. I think that's really, really quite important.
Thank you, Sheila. I know I would love to keep having this conversation for us to go deeper, but with the limitation of a 90-minute call, I'm going to go to the final bit that I want to share with you before I hand it back to Alex, which is when I do these scenarios, you saw that we tried our best to put together a video, and we're not expert video editors. And the reason for that is one of the biggest learnings I've had in doing futures thinking is communication makes or breaks a future scenario or world. And yes, you will receive all the decks, you will receive the video, and also that Google Doc that I promised. And so I'm gonna end with a story. Remember that training I had at the Institute for the Future? So I told you, right? I was getting really stressed, I was feeling overwhelmed, and I was Googling things about all these tech terms that I was hearing. And so, like any smart person would do, I decided to go to the toilet. So I was there in the toilet having a quiet moment for myself away from it all, and I saw this. I'm gonna share my screen again. I saw this, not that one. It's a blank one. You see my screen, right? I saw this sticker. This is the actual toilet. And there's a sticker. I was there. And it said, this toilet is under the surveillance of the city of Palo Alto and the state of California. By using this facility, you grant consent for your waste to be analyzed by the city, state, and any third party with whom this data is shared. Waste data may be combined with facial recognition or other identification technologies if necessary to contact you regarding your contribution. As you can imagine, I I pulled up my pants immediately and I started wondering, like, I looked around, are there cameras here? And of course, my very operationally oriented mind was asking, but how do they separate my pee from other people's pees? But I I started asking big existential questions about surveillance, privacy, about sharing bio data, things that normally a scenario would ask, but often unsuccessfully in the usual format we're used to, print scenario. And all it took was some fake sticker in a toilet. And apparently, this wasn't real. This is what we call in futures thinking a design fiction object that gives you a sense of a different future world, but using actual day to day mundane objects that you encounter in day to day life. So the point is, it doesn't need to be something huge. It could be as simple as a sticker or a banana with a sticker of a price so expensive that gives you a sense that bananas in the future will be so expensive because of climate volatility. And so with this, I will transition us to the last two steps of features or rogue features and that I won't get to cover today, which is once you have the imagination, the key part really is how do you draw strategic learnings from these feature worlds? What are the common strategic issues across these worlds and how do you make changes today? That's first. But the final one is it shouldn't just end with new decisions, new strategies, but really imbibing and strengthening muscles. What do you read? How do you do sense making of what you read? What is your information diet? How do you imagine and radically imagine? And that takes a training plan that is really personalized to you, or if you're thinking about your organization, the culture of your organization. It's like going to the gym and not having just some, cookie cutter plan made for everyone, because it will never stick if it's not made for you and your culture. So with that, and if you want to go deep into this, I'm taking a group of leaders in the social impact sector to the forest in the Netherlands next month. You can check it out in the Rogue Union website, or you just take this experience and start reading one thing to help you with that blind spot. Thank you so much, ICSC, Eva and Alex, for having me, and everyone for playing along in this day in the future.
Perfect. Many thanks, Chris, for sharing all of this, and really, special thanks to you for guiding us through this very engaging and imaginative meeting and session. Also, thank you to everyone for participating in today's session again. As usual, we will share a follow-up email with a summary, the recording, and of course, all the different resources from Chris in the following days. I'd like to quickly start now a feedback poll where I'd like to ask you to fill it out quickly. It shouldn't take long. And then before we wrap up, I'd like to share what's coming next for our community. So the next scanning meeting will be our annual meeting, for which you already received calendar blockers. So the annual meeting will this time be online to allow for more diverse participation. It will be an interactive 3 half-days online future thinking lab that will focus on experiencing foresight tools, stress testing strategies, and also futures of localization. The dates are 30th of June to 2nd July, and we will share official invitations within the next week. So we look forward to hopefully seeing you again in June and continuing this journey together. Thank you again for your participation. Thank you, Chris. Wishing you a good rest of the day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Thanks,
Thanks,
Alex.
Sheila. Thanks, Farouk.
Perfect. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Alex.